so afraid to tell of someone who is making sexual innuendos about your child.
And I think it's really hard when everybody else's children are doing those.
And how this being that is here, something in the shape.
Hi everyone, how are you? Welcome to Coffee with Temi. Woo! I'm so nervous today. I don't know why, but thank you for being here. So this is the first live streaming broadcast for this year, and I really, really hope it's going to bless somebody. I hope it's going to help someone. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Dr. Tegofatso Maimela. She's a public health specialist at the Charlotte Makeke Hospital here in Johannesburg, and we're going to be talking about gender-based violence. So I hope you're ready with your questions, with your pens, and with your ears wide open, because from chatting with her, I found out that this is a whole lot more than the physical part, which is what I've always thought it was, that to talk about gender-based violence, violence is physical, it's hurting, it's something you can see. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. I want her to be the one to tell us exactly what it is. So let me welcome Dr. Tegofatso Makeke. Oh, sorry. Dr. Tegofatso Maimela. How are you?
I am well, thank you, Temi. It's a pleasure to be with you and your audience today. I'm doing very well, thanks. Can't complain.
Thank you. Thank you for agreeing to do this. I know this is a long weekend and quite a number of people are away, but I believe that whoever needs to hear this will hear it, and there'll be a blessing coming from you for us now. So when we were chatting last week, you said something that I didn't think about. I mean, I know it, but I just never thought about it. So would you start by telling us exactly what is gender-based violence? When we're talking about it, apart from the physical thing, which is what I just, thought it was, can you just tell us what gender-based violence is?
Timmy, so gender-based violence is a form of either overt or non-overt sort of injury to another individual that one would place. And the hallmark of it, of course, is that the injury is directed at a different gender. And mostly that is, so the perpetrator is usually of one gender, and the person on whom the violence is being inflicted is of another gender. So usual injuries and violence, we do separate the two, so that we are able to better understand and unpack and explore some of the factors that lead to this particular form of violence. It is, of course, one of the, recently in one of the speeches by the president, he spoke about it during COVID times, that he thought that gender-based violence was like a second epidemic. And indeed, it's quite a very significant affliction that happens in our society. And one of the things that is very dangerous about it is that it is so, it's not so conspicuous. It happens behind closed doors most often, although you do see cases coming through to the health system or hospitals where there has been an exceptional amount of violence that requires some assistance from the medical services that are available. So essentially, it is one gender perpetrating violence on another, and there are many factors which I'm sure we'll unpack in our discussion today.
Okay, that was something that I joined a forum like this last month, and one of the ladies said something that really made it sort of like an eye opener for me. She said, "It starts with affection," and it just clicked. Like, that's true. If someone comes to you and slaps you in the face, obviously you're not going to go with them. So when she said it starts with affection, and then when I was talking to you, you said some of it, or most of it actually, that we do not see. It's the internal injuries, the emotional ones. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, I mean, the the very difficult aspect about gender-based violence, to really get to the heart and the root of it, is that it happens in such an insidious way, very slow. As you were saying, people don't necessarily start on the first date or within the first couple of months as they're going out and courting. They don't realize that there may be certain worrying behaviors that are closely or well described linked to a person who is likely or is possible or capable of inflicting psychological as well as physical injury to their partners. Um, so sorry, just to separate the two. So there's injury within a context where you know a person, so that's within an intimate partnership, and then there's also gender-based violence outside those relationships, and that can happen when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you just get assaulted by whatever person and for whatever reason. And that could also be obviously another layer to the gender-based violence. But what we're talking about here is when it is expressed or it is experienced in the context of an intimate relationship,
Yes.
and how, as you read and as you sort of explore these sort of dynamics, you see that to some extent there's a pattern of these gender dynamics that now play themselves out in a very controlling environment. It may start off small, comments about people's dress code or choice of
Yes, can
friends,
you explain
etc.
that? Because I didn't, one has probably experienced it without actually realizing that's what you were experiencing. When tiny, what were like snide remarks are made about your outfit or your look or something that you've done. Can you explain that? Because that's where it starts from, and we didn't pick it up on time.
Yeah. So I mean, in the beginning of the relationship, as things start, people are obviously infatuated. We mostly overlook some of the these red flags, we say sometimes, or these worrying behaviors and comments. Um, but it really is important that people are paying attention to who people are telling us they are. um, so while there may be some affection, and there may very well be real affection in the relationship, you may start hearing comments around, "I don't approve of this sort of way of speaking," or "I don't approve of this way of engaging with your friends," especially if it's not a non-threatening thing. If it's not overtly disrespectful in the context that you try to build within a relationship, but just it's disproportionate to the response and the reaction that you're getting from a partner. There may be signs of wanting to know who you're with, where you are, what you're doing, what time you'll be home. A little bit more than just a simple, "Let me know you're fine, let me know you're safe." Rather, "What are you
Okay.
doing? Who are you
Okay.
with? Why is it taking you so long to answer my phone calls? I've texted so many times." So that sort of very in-depth worry, um, wanting to have that much oversight and control over what your partner is doing, one demonstrates a trust issue that I mean, I don't know how relationships can grow without trust. So there's something happening there in terms of trust. But also there could be something around wanting to control the environment. And in that environment, if you are part of that environment, then trying to control your behavior. Eventually, as the talk continues and some of if the kind of talk does start to seep into your self-esteem, starts making you think and double question, or double guess yourself, then you sort of not sure whether or not this is the right thing to say, what to think, what to not. You become very anxious as a person who's in this relationship, because you don't know whether or not what you do or don't do is going to then spark a response that may be hurtful, and that if it isn't addressed, whether it's addressed, between the two partners or within a context of therapy or something, that could escalate, in many ways, into a dynamic where the power then is then exerted physically, not only just psychologically and emotionally. And sometimes, especially in our case in South Africa, where we see, or even it's really a global thing, where there is also these economic dynamics that happen between couples, and sometimes that sense of control also translates into economic ways. So yeah.
When I was watching this group that I joined, I before then, let me say when I was before then, I used to think that just leave. If someone is hurting you, if someone is doing whatever it is that you're not comfortable with, just leave. Then I heard the woman talking, and one thing that struck me with one of the women was this, and most of these women were professional women. They had jobs, because I used to think, it can't be because if it's a money issue, if it's an economical thing, you can say yeah. But some of them were saying, I stayed because of the children. I stayed because of the children. And in the end, I mean, not everybody in the group had left. Their husbands or partners said, but in the end, it actually was hurting the children more with them staying than if they had left. What do you have to say
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. I think, as we're saying, the course of such relationships takes time. You know, During the time, the family grows. Children come into the to the picture, and of course, that's one of the big reasons that victims of domestic violence, of intimate partner violence, have to balance. One, the exposure of the violence that the kids may see as it happens in real time in the home, a fear for whether or not that's going to be extended to the kids themselves. And so not wanting to have an environment, especially if it's, women or whoever, where they try to be the ones where the violence is directed, as opposed to the violence being directed to the kids. So they become that buffer to make sure that the kids are protected. But at the same time, if there is a economic dependency on the husband or the boyfriend, you may find that the mom does not necessarily know, or has not had an opportunity to be an economically active person, and therefore needs to survive in this relationship in order to be able to feed herself and her children. So that's a very difficult dynamic to sort of deal with, and oftentimes people would stay in relationships thinking it's best to be there for the children, but of course this exposure to violence doesn't necessarily protect them. Emotionally, they become incredibly anxious, some of them depressed. They may not show it, but certainly that exposure to this uncertain and unsafe environment, whether it's verbal abuse or whether it's physical abuse, the fact that the children are witnessing it, they understand that the place that they're in is generally unsafe. So I think there's an idea that we need to also try and help those who are in this situation to try and figure out how to, one, find a way to be economically active, um, to be able to feed themselves and be able to have the confidence that they'll be able to feed themselves and children, and maybe then they'll feel like they are able to leave. But there are real fears, especially if you've been in a very, very abusive relationship where there have been threats made to the victim of the violence. If you hear over and over and over again some of the disparaging remarks, you may start thinking, oh, I'm not attracted, oh, I'm not this, I'm not this. But as you start believing the words of the person who's perpetrating this violence to you, there may have been incidences where they have verbally threatened to harm you should you leave, and harm the children should you leave. And that is a very real fear, and it's something that we can't downplay, because certainly if my action of leaving or even attempting to leave is going to put my children's life at jeopardy, I'm not going to risk that. It's very logical and very protective. But there may be an area, and I mean, we've got really good resources available in terms of toll-free platforms by the Department of Social Development, where you call and you literally have to keep speaking to someone who can give you a different narrative and different tools to work with, so that you start building some sort of strength and capacity to imagine a life outside of this abuse. And statistically, I think globally, they mention that it takes a victim of domestic violence something up to 7 to 10 times attempts at leaving, coming back, attempts at leaving, coming back, and only sometimes up to 10 times successfully leaving and leaving for good.
Wow.
So it takes some time, and understandably so, because you want to make sure that you've got at least a community that's going to accept you and your children. If you do have extended family that is protective and able to make sure that you are safe, perhaps it's easier. But if you are on your own, if you're in a different province, a different country, for example, and you are fielding this idea by yourself, it may be very, very challenging. To know that you will be able to, one, go out and go out safely and not have your life at risk, or your children's lives at risk. And then secondly, to be able to figure out a way to start all over again by yourself, having a roof over your head, having food, and being able to also have to carry some of the costs that come with raising children as well. So it is a very complex thing. People cannot, and we should learn to be a little bit kinder and more compassionate to those who are in the situation, that it's not so easy to leave. It really is an incredible internal struggle before that happens. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. What you're saying actually confirms what those ladies were saying, because this lady started a foundation for women like her, and it took her 10 times. She said it took her 10 times the 10th attempt before she could leave and not come back, because she came from a home where even up to now her parents are together. She had a very good job and she didn't understand what was going on, you know
Yeah.
and she did finally leave. And I think also one thing that women, because I do know that this happens on the opposite direction as well. Sometimes the man is the one who's been abused, but we're talking about the women today. But some of the women seems, I don't want to sound so uncharitable, because of the life they've built together, whether with the kids or finances, things they've acquired. It becomes difficult for them to give it up, or the thought of, I'm going to have to give all of this up to go on. How can they be helped? Because excuse me, I'm hearing this for the first time, that they can actually call social services and have someone help them with their thinking, to renew their thinking. Because
Yeah.
I know there is a problem with some police stations. When you go to report, I know there is a problem.
Yeah.
So how
Okay.
can they? Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And yes, unfortunately, we do have incidences where, and stories where people have gone to police stations and have not been met with people who were either trained to deal with this kind of situation, or at least the awareness and self and compassion of people to believe them that they needed to be helped. I don't have a list of the different foundations and different
Yes, I'll put some
NGOs
up.
that support that really do try and create a safety net for how and when people decide to leave, women decide to leave domestic abused homes. But certainly, I see the thing is we have to understand that it's taken a journey to get to this point, and the more realistic way of thinking is to understand that it's going to take some time to have a journey out. And so, you know, yeah, if you call one of these domestic violence hotlines, I know that they are 24 hours a day, that there is a counselor there. She tries to establish whether you are at risk, like immediately, if
Right
your
there.
life is at risk, or if it's an issue of trying to sort of understand why the abuse is happening, what level of abuse is happening, who is involved, and also trying to understand whether you are at a point of being ready to leave. But they don't just say, oh, if you're not ready to leave, then there's nothing. They do try and explore ways in which you can start empowering yourself, empowering the way you think, how about how you value yourself within the context of the family or the relationship, can start, you know, feeling like you can handle difficult. I mean, you're already in a difficult situation, but feeling like you can handle what's in the future if the future means starting again. And I think starting all over again for any person in any circumstance is very, very scary. Starting a
Mm-hmm.
new career, starting a new family, starting anything where you're
Mm-hmm.
used to something and you have to just build from the bottom up again is
Again, yeah.
exceptionally difficult. So I understand that particular perspective. And I think what we need to do is, one, make sure that, you know, people are in a safe, like in safe environments. There are these NGOs that have households where a mother and her children can come and sleep and stay there. They are funded, so they will have food to eat, etc., as they start figuring out how to put their lives together again and start living independently. Where there is support, I think, available through the extended family, what I would definitely try and also support the family with is also counseling,
Okay.
because sometimes you may, you know, you're dealing with someone who's traumatized. They have particular triggers and anxieties that you may not know exist. And if you at least give yourself the exposure to some sort of a counseling, even calling the same hotline and saying, listen, my sister or my aunt or my cousin, I want to know how to best support her. These are her behaviors. I'm not sure what that means. Should I ignore it? Should we escalate it? Should she see what, a psychiatrist? I don't know. But that the family should also feel empowered to access these platforms so that they know and are knowledgeable on how to respond and how to accommodate this shift that may need to happen for the person who, for their family member who now would like to or is ready to leave that home environment, that hostile home environment, and move on to a new setting.
Okay. Um, there was something. No, now the question has escaped me. Now it was right there on the tip of my. When when they come to you, by the time you see them, right? Oh, okay. Maybe I should say, have you seen someone who has been abused, domestic abuse? What do they? How do you handle it when they come to you? If they've not come to report it, how do you handle it?
So usually, so we were, so, you know, a lot of our exposure as medical doctors is at facilities, crisis centers or health centers, where we are meant to support the legal aspect of a domestic violence or even a gender-based violence incident with medical reporting. So we are meant to make sure that we document what we see in an accurate and concise but clear way of the injuries that we see. So our support to the process is to provide medical evidence that um, either supports the series of events that has been suggested in the claim against the perpetrator. So yes, we have, and this is exactly why I've been, one of the the things that hurt most about being in this space is to see this ongoing violence that happens. As you said, it happens both to males and females, but the predominant numbers come from females. And what you do see is that, by the time they are accessing medical health, that means they have had multiple bruises, mostly. They have had cuts, they've got, broken bones, broken whatevers, they are physical evidence of injury, whether it's blunt force or even through stabs. Sometimes people get burnt with water from a hot kettle. Um, and yes, it's very, very difficult. You can see that this person has been traumatized, and they are coming in because they literally need help, or they need to have some sort of a case, a restraining case, etc., etc. A restraining order for the, to
Yeah,
create
for the
some
yeah.
sort of safety at home. And so, I mean, what we do, and and this is the thing, it has to be a societal response, because as a health sector, we're right at the end of this. We're right at the end of the problem, where there is injury and somebody needs to be patched up, or a bone needs to be, corrected, or stitches need to be put in. That's right at the end. And what we need to be dealing with are the precursors to that lead up
So it
to
gets the yeah.
violence. And it's a societal issue. It is not, it really is. We were talking last week, Timmy, when we were busy exploring this discussion, that there are actual social economic drivers that keep playing out between these dynamics that are gender centric. And, you have these very, very harmful patriarchal ideologies of power over people, power over women, power over children, that sometimes then seeps into domestic violence and into even child abuse. And we have to start tackling the narrative that we have, the assumptions that we take on from each other, from our families, from our workplaces, that make us think it's okay to think you are more powerful than, therefore you can, over another person. And these are very deep. They stem over decades, centuries, and it's not unique to South Africa. It is a global problem. It's and But unfortunately, South Africa has reported the highest number of gender-based violence statistics, even femicide with it, which is death of women at the hands of males. And our numbers are really, they're frightening. And we need to really take this issue very, very seriously and make it a collective problem, and not something that the South African police have to do with, or the criminal justice system has to deal with. But we as families need to be talking about this. We need to be educating our brothers, our sons, our nephews. We have to be having these conversations so that we interrupt things that we can see later in life could create problems in terms of gender equity and gender equality. And we really want to see the different genders having an equal play, equal footing in both access to economic activity as well as independence in the home, so that there is partnership rather than there is a sense of dependency
Yeah.
that then is then established in the absence of that.
I
Yeah.
was going to say that when we're talking to young people, we so many times focus on just the girl. You know, I probably am guilty of that. Maybe because I have a daughter, and so it's closer to home for me. But I think we're always on about the girl or girl child, as is said now. But we need to also teach the boys what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
I've said this so many times. I was in a class with teenagers, and a 13-year-old, we know we're having we're talking about gender-based violence, and he said, oh, sometimes you have to slap the girls, that they don't listen, but once you slap them around, it's
Yeah.
like they listen, they're realigned immediately.
Yeah.
And not only was I shocked by a 13-year-old saying that, the girls, some of the girls, not all of them that were in the group, they were nodding, which means they've accepted the fact that I'm going to be slapped around at some point in my life, and it's okay. I think there's a problem with how boys are
Hello, can you
being
hear me?
raised. Can you hear me? Have I lost you? Your audio is off. Can you hear
Can
me
you hear
now?
me?
Yes, I can hear you. We lost you again.
Can I reset?
Um, okay, okay. She'll have to refresh and come back. I do believe that when we focus on just telling the girls how to behave, what to do, and what not to do, we need to let the boys. Welcome back. Are you okay
Thanks,
now?
sorry.
Okay, okay. Um, when we're talking to children, it shouldn't just be to the girls. We need to talk to the boys
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah.
And that's what yes, and that's what we keep seeing. It's always the girl child, the girl child, the girl child. We're not focusing as much attention on the boys, and the boys are learning from those who are learning from what someone has said. This is how it's done. This is how it's always been done. But that way might not be the correct way. You
Right.
know, to I mean, young boys now find it so funny if you say open the door for a woman, for example, or let the girl go through the door first. It's like, why?
Yeah.
It's equal right. But I think we've gone way over this, doing the equal rights thing and everybody being the same, that we have lost. It's almost like lost a bit of our humanity.
Yeah.
Remember when I was chatting, I said when we do certain things to other people, it's because you can't see that person as being human. Because if you do see that this
Yeah.
person is just like me, you
Yeah.
will not do it. You
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying? So how can we help? Because now it's not just the girls. How can we help the boys? I know, really, really, I know you've got boys.
Yeah. So
Uh,
I've got
and,
two
and you were
sons.
talking about it as well.
I've got
You
two
have to watch
sons,
how
and
they talk. Yeah. How can we help? Because it has to start from when they're young.
yeah.
It has to start from there.
Yeah. Um, you know, I've got two boys as we're talking, and I feel a very clear responsibility. And my sister also has two boys, and we have this clear responsibility
Mhm.
of identifying, being watchful, being attentive, listening very carefully to the conversations that they bring home from school. Things about pushing people around in the classroom, incidences where someone is kissing somebody, and we never want to be completely flippant and not attentive. You don't want to explore what is happening,
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
happened, what were the dynamics, etc. What do you think? Was it good? Do you think she felt fine after you pushing, or do you think she felt whatever? It's important, I think, just to start from grassroots to try and make sure that the boys learn how to respect women, girls, and women from an early age. You know, the thing is, I don't know, if you're in a household where these gender disparities and domestic violence is normalized, how to pull kids out of that and to try and reframe what should be a respectful environment obviously would require a lot of counseling. One, identifying that a boy child is either exhibiting very worrying behavior and being able to put them in some sort of a therapy um, um, a program that can maybe help them just identify what's happening and how to interpret what's happening in the home. But I mean, we have every chance with the kids. Every time they're watching a program we can just, at the end of it, what did you think about that? What did you see? Exploring with your children is so important, especially when they're young, because the world is still going to feed them these norms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You are unmatched with the kind of messaging that comes in through media, through movies, through gaming. I mean, even simple games, simple games that they play on PlayStation and Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
You can't not know what they are,
What
and you
they're
can't
doing.
not. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be listening, because as the little program is telling them, go fetch this box or this machine gun or whatever it is, you have to be listening and asking, okay, why this game, why this language, why is the behavior towards the lady in this game looking a particular way. And you have to just question and prompt conversation. Hopefully that conversation would continue as they grow, because especially in their teenage years, they're going to have to deal with real issues around consent, with from a girl child, obviously, especially. But I think it's also very unfair that we put this responsibility on girls
Only
to
on the
be able
girls.
to
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
to have to navigate seeing signals that somebody's exerting their affection a little bit too much in a way that they're uncomfortable. We have to put the responsibility on the boys, because they're the ones who are going to start doing the initiating, and they need to know how to do it safely, how to approach friendships safely,
Okay.
how to also be aware and intervene where possible when they are seeing their classmates, or let's say their cousins are behaving inappropriately, where a girl child or a young woman is involved. And we have to be able to give them that confidence to speak about things and say, and say that, when you see something wrong happening, don't just say, oh, you know it's that households, how we have this thing, it's the household's problem. Don't get into other people's business. But it's very difficult, but we need to be able to open up this conversation. I would love to see more men having this conversation with us, and saying, that these are the ways in which I had to reprogram myself, because either I grew up in a context where I was exposed to domestic violence, or I have had incidences where I was inappropriate with another woman, or a girlfriend or whatever, and then help us understand what tools they used, so we can then also
To
use
realign
these
themselves.
tools.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because some people actually move out of that place. They find therapy. They go to, into places where they actually are able to deal with the core issue, the root issue, the emotional scars or the psychological traumas, and start not projecting them onto another human being, but starting to deal with them. But we need to also find these men and bring them into this conversation, so they can also give us some tools, some information, so we are able to appropriately support our boy children, our brothers, our uncles, our nephews, as in
Yeah.
when we start seeing problematic behavior.
I'm reading this now. It says another thing that you touched on earlier is to equally acknowledge the emotional lives of both boys and girls. This thing of toughen up. And funny, I was having this chat with someone a few days. You're a boy. Boys don't cry, and somehow we think that only the girl is going to be affected or is being affected by what's going on in the house. But studies have shown that this can go either way. A child from an abusive family can become an abuser, or they somehow always find themselves relationships that are abusive. Because without knowing it consciously, they are now attracted, or they find themselves going to people who end up being abusive
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the thing is, when you don't, this is the problem about having that narrative, and so and I think it's a societal abuse towards males, to expect them not to show emotion when they are humans full of thought, full of emotion.
Their ego.
And what what is really dangerous with that kind of um, narrative is then we we see that they like they two there's only an acceptable way that male emotion has been normalized, and that's anger. You know, when males get angry, it's like,
So
oh,
that's
he's just
violence.
angry. That thing. But we actually create an environment where that's the most acceptable way for them to express frustration, and we don't make it acceptable for them to cry in frustration as women do. We cry when we're disappointed, when we're frustrated, when we are overwhelmed, when we are whatever. We are given permission because of the way the genders are described. But what you also then do is you teach them to suppress so many feelings, and over time, and in up through into adulthood, they won't even be able to identify and communicate what the actual emotion that they're feeling is. Is it anxiety? Is it disappointment? Is it frustration? Is it, maybe they'll just say, no, I'm just angry, or whatever it is, because we don't give them the ability
The
and
language, they do not, yeah.
the permission to use those words. I'm deeply disappointed, and that should also be something that we acknowledge as a very painful experience. And it's, I'm hurt, I am those. So then we don't know what we're actually dealing with, because they haven't exercised the muscle of saying, this is what I'm feeling firstly, and this is how I'm going to articulate how I'm feeling in such a way that we can then deal with an issue that's causing you anxiety, or causing you frustration, or causing you a sense of depression, of being overwhelmed, of being stressed, or whatever the case may be. And I think it's really important for us as a society to really accommodate males, and not be afraid of seeing our partners hurting to the point where they cry, and not um um and yeah, and being able to respond in a kind and compassionate way, where we don't judge the feeling or the expression of the feeling, especially if it's tearful and sad, that we actually acknowledge that it's brave for them to show that emotion in a society that tells them that it is not masculine to do so. So I
Yeah.
definitely, my boys can cry. They can cry as long and as hard as they need to, and it's
I
whatever.
know that.
Yeah, you know them, right?
I know that one. Let's go back to something you said last week when we were talking. If someone comes to the hospital and they see you, they see a doctor, and you can tell that this is abuse, but they don't want to report it. But they will come in, from what you said,
Yeah,
they will come in because they want the treatment.
yeah.
So what do you do? What will be your responsibility? I mean,
My
in
res-
case they change their mind, I come later,
right.
what would you do?
So when we were talking about sexual assault at the time. So this was the context of the conversation that we had, and I mean, we know the statistics of sexual assault in South Africa, and that it's commonly less than 10% of incidences end up being reported. So by the time we come, we know that there is something that has happened, that obviously the victim or the survivor is trying to get addressed. A lot of the times you find, not a lot of the times, but there are incidences, as we talked about, where the survivor isn't ready yet to open up a case and go through the legal aspect of it, but certainly would require, for example, the post-exposure prophylaxis, exposure to conditions, possible sexually transmitted infections, possible HIV. Um, and so we have to give them like a set of treatment as they are there, and some for them to take home for the first week, and then we obviously see them serially, obviously for the counseling aspect as well, and to a follow up HIV test about 6 months later. And so our responsibility, obviously, as a health system, is to make sure that he or she doesn't get infectants. So we have to give that those medications. We have to provide counseling. But in the event where the patient doesn't necessarily want to open up a case, my suggestion and my advice usually is that we can take the evidence, put it together, because it's there in the time that we're meeting each other.
Okay.
If the problem is if the case goes if is opened, even 12 days later, there's hardly any evidence that we can collect to
Oh, okay.
corroborate.
They don't come to you immediately.
Yeah, so the examination has to happen immediately, obviously in a safe environment. And it's a very difficult examination to take a person through. It's very, very difficult. But we generally advise that we at least collect the evidence so that it can be placed in safekeeping, so that when the storm of the initial trauma starts to subside, and if the survivor chooses then to pursue a criminal case, then at least she has evidence that can support her at that time and make for a successful conviction should it get to that.
Okay, okay. Is it free? So because I think sometimes people think this is going to be costly for me to go to the hospital because of all the tests that has to be done. If someone has been assaulted, a physical one now, because we can't see the bruises inside, is it free for them to come to the hospital, whatever it is that needs to be done? Do
Yeah,
they have to,
yeah.
okay, even if they're not ready to report it yet?
Yeah, all of it is free. So it's like going for the SAPS. You get your case number. They come with you. So usually the point the steps, you start at the SAPS
Okay.
offices. They accompany you with the kits that they have. So they also stock the kits and they bring the kits. And we also have kits in the event that somebody does come without a case number. We conduct the examination. This is a district health function, so most district hospitals have like a particular. So it's not casualty. It's not the same as casualty. You won't be standing in the same line as people who've had a car accident or something. There's an actual dedicated service for domestic violence. And for gender-based violence and sexual assault.
Is it in
So
every hospital?
it's not in every single hospital. There are certain facilities that are linked to the station. So
Okay.
the police station would be able to take you, depending on where that police
That
station
area.
is.
Okay.
They are very aware of which centers drain the cases that they are then going to deal with.
Okay.
And then yeah, so then that service is completely free. The medication is free. The follow-up visits are free. So yeah, it's absolutely a free service that's available. Obviously, because we want to be able to deal with the incident, give the post-exposure prophylaxis within 72 hours, so that you don't have a
What's
risk of
that?
HIV. It's the medication that we give to prevent you from getting STIs, HIV, and those have to be administered within 72 hours of an incident. So we want to make sure that we're not making cost a barrier to access, and that's why it's a
Okay.
completely free service.
Okay. Okay. So if someone comes in, I just want to know if they don't come, if sometimes you're in shock, something happens and you can't even, so if it wears off after that 72 hours, you now want to come up to report it or come to the hospital to get treatment, would that be like way too late? I mean, obviously, I understand that doctors will attend to them, but can
Yeah,
anything be done?
I think um, I think what would be important in that case is to really be honest with with the survivor about one, the ability to be able to get evidence. I would still continue with the examination, even if it's 2 days or
Okay.
3 days later, um, and conduct the whole evidence collection process. Because we aren't gods, we don't know. There could still be sufficient evidence, although we know that the chances are slimmer the longer we wait. I would advise if the person hasn't if the person if in fact they were to call before, I would have said, please bring all the clothing items that you had on you on the night of the incident if you haven't washed them already, because there's still evidence on clothing items that we could also add to the pack. But certainly I would still undertake the process of counseling, even though we won't be able to start, let's say, ARVs, because after a particular time, there really is no value in doing that. We have to actually just protect you from the other short-term sexually transmitted infections, and then make sure that we keep testing after a particular time to make sure that you're out of the window of infection for HIV. And if there is an outcome where there is transmission, then of course the health service is able to put you on long-term ARVs. But there is going to be a lot of counseling that would be required in that context. A lot of counseling that survivor would need in order to sort of have a new normal of life with a condition that she obviously did not get
Yeah.
by choice.
I know about the Teddy Bear Foundation, and but I what maybe I need clearance. The Teddy Bear Foundation, is it only for children who are at risk?
Yeah.
I
So
know
the
that kids who have been sexually abused, but
yeah.
I don't know if adults can also go in there. If you suspect a child has been sexually abused or is going through some kind of sexual thing in the house, I know for children the Teddy Bear Clinic is there. But can
Yeah.
adults also go in there? Do they maybe have safe houses?
So the teddy bear clinic is very particular to children.
Okay.
And obviously because they've got a team of very specialized child psychologists, child psychiatrists, physios and occupational therapists, a very extensive multidisciplinary team. They try and elicit through play and other conversations behaviors that that could draw out what kind of possible trauma and or abuse that child may be facing. Um, there are, Damian, I think we can go online and look, but there are safe houses for adults themselves to be able to access. But the Teddy Bear Clinic deals only with children. But of course, they've got networks of people that they can then refer either the family to for comprehensive therapy, so that there is both, and I think as a parent, obviously you want to be capacitated to address some of these, especially if you are not aware that there has been exposure to your child in a way that obviously has now developed into
Into something
behavior.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know about as we're rounding up, I know about the Tears Foundation, and I think mostly for adults. I
Yeah.
know there's a helpline that you can call. There's an SMS line that you can call, 24/7.
Yeah.
Do you think they have do they have safe houses? Because sometimes I
Yeah.
think when a woman has finally been able to pluck up the courage to say, okay, I'm going, they need to
Yeah.
have somewhere to go.
Yeah. I'm not very familiar about their, yeah, they do have support centers across the 9 provinces. In fact, just looking at their website now, it seems that they do have these available safe houses and support centers.
Yeah.
But certainly, and I think this is probably or even Safer Spaces, Tears Foundation as well,
Okay.
and other charities as well. I think, and it's probably going to be something that the dialogue may assist, is if you are in a position where you know the home environment is not a safe environment, not only a physically safe environment, but a psychologically damaging environment, and you need to get out, start with some counseling. Start with people who know this field very, very well and who know the networks and who knows what kind of need can be met by which foundation and which non-government organization or community-based organization. Start with that. Usually they'll give you checklists, they'll give you some sort of guide to sort of establish where you are in your readiness to leave,
Okay.
and also where your closest haven can be, should you decide in the moment that this is the moment for us to leave or for me to leave. I would definitely advise that they do a little research on Google, find out, or even call the hotlines and the contact details of these places, just so that they know that when they do get there, there isn't going to be a problem, and that it can be facilitated. And they probably do better follow-ups, they'll probably register you in their database, and as if it's an acute, obviously a acute situation where you need help today, right now, getting out, they'll be able to make sure that they follow up that you landed up in the right and safe place for that.
I know we're running out of time now, but I just remembered something we talked about. Um, Women who go through this are ashamed, even though the shame is not theirs, but they're ashamed to say, this is what is happening to me. Ashamed, I don't know, to say, I made a mistake. Everybody
Yeah,
else was right. For example, I made a mistake. Da, 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 da. But
yeah.
you also said something. I said, can you find out? Can you, in your office with friends, can you say if someone is being sexually abused? I'm sorry, not
Um,
sexually abused now. If they're going through
if
domestic
they're going
violence,
through
is that things you can look at or you can
there are
see,
some signs. There are some signs.
please?
Although not everybody demonstrates the signs, so it's not 100% going to get this, and it depends also on the length of the abuse. But if
Okay.
you are at least seeing your friend or your colleague before they got married or before they got into a relationship, and they exerted a particular personality that sort of starts to change following that commitment, um, that they become reserved, that they are not interested in social activities, they're not, or even are not allowed to go to office parties or office happy hours or whatever the case may be. They
Yeah.
aren't given permission to do all of that, and that they don't even want to have go out on coffees or whatever. They'd rather stay at home, deal with the business of home, and have just enough to come into the office, do their work, and get out. If there is, I know in corporate South Africa, there are incredible workplace programs where you can get access to these programs, so employee wellness programs. And I would then sit and suggest to my colleague, if you're going through something that you can't tell me, at the very least, it's been paid for by the company, get the counselor to talk to you about something that you need help with, because I can see that something's different with you and you're not okay. Maybe I'm not the safest person to talk to, and that's fine. But just know that I care and I'm worried about you. And I think maybe you need to speak to one of the employee health and wellness services that are available. That's certainly something that I would do if I could see some red flags in my colleagues. Yeah, distractibility, not being able to deliver work, um, having many sick leave days, family responsibility leaves, just something just doesn't seem settled at home. Those are sort of the things that I would look out for. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. We'll put this on podcast sometime next week. So for those who have been able to catch, I understand people have gone on the long weekend. Wish I had
Right.
a weekend. Wish I had a long weekend to just go away. But thank you so much. This has been helpful. I know some people are not able to, even when you're hearing it, they don't want anyone to know this is what they're going through. It's that shame thing again. But I'm hoping that if we've noticed it in someone else, or just say, oh, there's this thing you can listen to, because we can tell, this is just not this person. Temi is not behaving the way she used to. It could be other things, but just in case, we will show that compassion for the person, show that concern, and they will understand that it's out of love that we're showing this, and they will do something about it. And
Yeah.
if I get questions afterwards, some questions are not going to come up here. If I get questions afterwards, I will send them to you, and you'll be gracious enough to reply. Hey,
Absolutely. Because certainly an
thank
important topic. I'm very,
you.
very grateful to have been invited to the platform. And
Oh,
yes, I
thank you
hope
so
we do
much.
start breaking down the stigma of domestic violence and gender-based
That's it, the
violence.
stigma. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
And
it.
we attend to it as a society in a very loving and humane way.
Thank you,
Thank,
Dr. Sekufat.
thank you
So
so much.
I'll see you next week.
No problem.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. It's been Coffee with Temi, and I hope to see you all next week. Well, not see you, but I hope you tune in again next week when there'll be another video. This will be podcasted on Apple Podcast, and I will send you a notification as soon as it's up. So if you have not tuned into my Apple Podcast, it is now. You know about it. Thanks for tuning in I'm from Scotland. Hi there, how are you? And all those who were able to take time off from their long weekend, I really appreciate it. Bye for now.
So afraid to tell of someone who is making sexual innuendos about your child.
And I think it's really hard when everybody else's children are doing those.
And how this being that is here, something in you